Welcome to the Altarian Triad by Jamie Lee Woodman. Chapter 3: Hospital Cuisine. Waking in a place you weren't expecting is a daunting experience for anyone. Waking on a train, for instance, gets the anxiety levels rising until you see whether you've passed your destination. Waking at someone else's house can also cause panic. And then there's waking in a hospital. Opening his eyes slowly, Randel jolted awake, confused by his surroundings. The environment was sterile, while the bed was hard and uncomfortable. The brief shock passed when his memory returned, allowing him to breathe calmly. His beautiful knight in shining armour, Amy, was gone. He had not seen her since the night of the crash, and although this upset him, he had finally accepted it. Many nurses replaced her presence, the current one being an older female who had seen too much sun over the years. She was friendly, and he got along well with her. His only quarrel was the intensity of the cigarette odour which clung to her clothing. As she cared for his needs kindly, he bit his tongue and kept quiet. Looking at the unopened package of jelly, dry bread, single-serve butter and watered-down soup next to the over-processed meat and veg, Randel thought himself lucky that he wasn't a fussy eater. In fact, he had no problem with the food at all. Some people dined well and put a lot of effort into their cooking, but not him. Cooking was for fuel. It wasn't a hobby. He understood and respected those who spent hours in the kitchen. It just wasn't for him. Part of the issue was that he didn't know how to cook and often burned everything. The other part was that he didn't understand why you would spend over 45 minutes in the kitchen to cook something you could eat in less than 5. Although his everyday cuisine was never anything special, Randel did cover the basics. He threw one cut-up potato into the microwave with frozen mixed veggies. He also had a portable grill on the kitchen bench to cook cheap packaged meat in less than 10 minutes. For this reason, hospital food wasn't much of a step down. He enjoyed not cooking while having the lukewarm meals brought to his bedside 3 times daily. It was like a vacation. It had now been a couple of days since the incident. He still couldn't remember why he was driving or where he was going on the night of the crash. This lack of knowledge and the severe hit to the temple were the reasons for his extra long stay. Hospitals tend to be cautious when there is a head or heart issue. The idea of getting out was appealing, though returning to his everyday life wasn't as satisfying. The 9-to-5 desk job and his meaningless, empty, unfulfilled, monotonous, boring, depressive life gave him nothing to look forward to. As you can probably decipher, Bolovich wasn't a positive man, and things had worsened over the past 4 years. The recent incident would only add to his self-narration of how much life sucked. As much as Randel would have liked to continue focusing on his depressing life, there was another more pressing issue, one that was quite peculiar. When one of the nurses visited, they asked many questions that should have been easy to answer. Things like, where did you grow up? What school did you go to? And so forth. Naturally, he went to answer them without a thought, until he realised he couldn't remember. The only significant information he could recall was that he was American. This came as a shock to the nurse, who only heard an English accent. Thankfully, Randel's citizenship was still in his wallet. His first memory was of a layover in France. Before starting his new position at immigration in England, Randel was scheduled to attend a 3-day conference about software. During this time, he met an Englishwoman named Evie. They immediately hit it off and moved in together near the heart of London not long after the conference. 3 years later, the beautiful couple broke up. Unable to pay rent, Bolovich moved to his current dwelling. From there, life was dull. He continued to work in the immigration department, which recently upgraded his sponsorship to a permanent residency. And that about summed up his life. Literally. The trip to France occurred approximately 7 years ago when he was 20. That meant he couldn't remember his teens, the USA, his parents, or any of his childhood. Some who heard of Randel's situation presumed he had amnesia. But the funny thing about amnesia is that it rarely happens outside of fictional tales. It's great for books and movies, though it's scarce in reality. For this reason, the medical staff at Wellington Hospital decided the issue with their patient wasn't due to the bump on the noggin, but instead to past trauma. As it wasn't definitive, the diagnosis wasn't shared with their patient. Not only was it a sensitive issue, but they also couldn't rule out that the car accident had inflamed the memory loss that might have already been present. It was recommended that Bolovich have follow-up appointments with a GP and visit a psychologist weekly after discharge. As the car insurance company was covering the costs, Randel gracefully accepted the recommendations. The unwelcome attention inside the hospital left Randel feeling invaded. He was already sensitive about his depression and looked away shyly when it was suggested that he might benefit from medication. It wasn't that Bolovich disagreed with the medical recommendations. He knew it was the right path. Yet he was too stubborn to accept professional help. This is why, when asked how he was doing, he used words such as fine and doing well to avoid further probing. To distance himself from the woes of his life, Bolovich required a distraction, and crappy primetime news became the focus. It wasn't the type of thing he usually liked to watch, though, since they'd been reporting on a new serial killer named the London Butcher, he had become fascinated. Both targets were killed down back alleyways in extremely brutal ways. The first had their head ripped off, while the second had his arms torn from his torso. The murderer had taken 2 victims so far and eluded the police. Despite the media's obvious attraction to any type of murder, this case was even more compelling, as a human shouldn't have had the strength to commit these acts. And although the investigators were saying these atrocities must have been done with a device, the media ran with their own theories. Now, it was all anyone could talk about. Such media coverage of serial killers was supposed to be a thing of the past. The fear was that the killer might become obsessed with the attention and kill more people to remain in the headlines. There was also the danger of reporters releasing specifics about a murder that investigators wanted to keep quiet. However, the story was too compelling for the press to ignore. Talk show personalities began using the recent murders to expand their audience. Given little information about the case was available to the public, they targeted other competing media by questioning their work practices. Things like they're interfering with the case and leave the victims alone had become standard headlines. Regardless of the media's true morals, it made the case riveting. The press was having a field day after a long dry spell, and the ratings were through the roof. As he watched 2 celebrities on TV debate the finer details of media responsibility, a doctor partially obscured Randel's view. Sometimes, with all the traffic passing through his shared room, it was hard to tell if they were there for him. And as most practitioners don't have the common decency to introduce themselves, Bolovich ignored them until it was obvious. So your results are fine and you're ready to go home, unless you like hospital cuisine. The doctor looked up from his notes for no other reason than to see if his patient was amused. He didn't wait for a reply. Good. You can go as soon as you're ready. Your GP will be able to answer any further inquiries and follow-ups. Thanks for staying at our beautiful hospital. The doctor was practically out the door before finishing his sentence. It was the public system at its finest. Randel hated funny doctors. mainly because the only people who ever thought they were funny were themselves. If leaving because you feel better isn't a good enough reason, then avoiding another round of bad jokes from that doctor will certainly send you away, the nurse laughed. Randel smiled appropriately, only just realising she was there. The nurse had slipped across from the patient next to him with a friendly, leathery smile. The smoke smell was not as bad today. She had either done the washing or wasn't having a stressful shift. So who can we call to pick you up? She hadn't read the notes stating he had no one in his life. No one, Randel replied. I can call for I'm afraid not, the middle-aged woman interrupted firmly. You've had a major accident and a hard hit to the head. I'm sure you can think of someone. Her tone indicated that she wasn't a person to mess with. Randel wondered if she was stating hospital policy or just being demanding. Nevertheless, with his tail between his legs, he came up with a name. Xavier, he blurted out. I have his number in my phone. Great. The location of your room is on the paper beside you. He will need to come to the ward to pick you up. Do you understand? She asked slowly, with eyes poised on her patient, to let him know that any tricks would not be tolerated. Yes, Randel replied, almost fearful of giving any other response. The bossy nurse nodded and walked out of the room, confident in her stance. Randel picked up his phone. It was smashed in 3 places, with one large crack down the middle. Other than that, it worked fine. He found Xavier's name and dialed. As it rang, he hoped his colleague from work wouldn't answer. He wasn't so lucky. Despite Bolovich's fears, Xavier's reply was heartwarming. He displayed genuine concern and was happy to drive to the hospital immediately. His response was that of a true friend, even though all their interactions occurred at work and during post-work drinks. That's why Randel remembered him. Drinking with his workmates was his only social outlet in his pointless life. After the call, the nurse closed the curtains and advised Bolovich to get dressed before going outside to wait in the hall. Knowing the outside didn't have a TV, he took his time disrobing the infamous hospital gown with an opening in the back. Once dressed, he looked down at his blood-soaked clothes. It was a surprise that he'd survived the crash. A little off balance, Randel grabbed his medications before walking towards the nurse's station. His head was hurting, as were various limbs. Only then did he realise there was no way he was fit enough to work. He'd have to pick a few shows with multiple seasons to keep himself busy at home for at least a week. After reaching the nurse's station, Bolovich was directed to some benches down the hall. He turned and took a few steps before being interrupted by an unnerving sensation. He couldn't put his finger on it, though it was strangely familiar. He paused to regain his composure, avoiding looking down as it made him dizzy. Trying to stay upright, he found a fixed point to focus on. It was a green exit sign, which got increasingly blurry the longer he stared at it. Feeling nauseous, he shifted his vision towards the doors beneath the sign. They opened from the middle as they did in the movies. Becoming transfixed, he could have sworn there was a black void in the gap. It was slithering like a snake. Blaming his poor vision on the medication, he glared at the people at the end of the hall. On the right side were parents with a child, and on the left was a small, older gentleman in a trench coat and fedora hat, leaning against the bench. Shaking his head as he came to terms with his ill health, Bolovich decided to push forward. He was unsteady and found it difficult to walk in a straight line. The situation became even more complex when the hall appeared to be getting longer. Just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, the room began to darken as shadows from all corners expanded and moved independently. They were escaping the doors and ceilings as if they had a mind of their own. The hall spun as a bass-like hum increased from an unknown direction. It was starting to drown out all other noises around him. A high-pitched screech shortly followed this. It was like the shadows were calling out in pain and despair as reality fell into the pits of hell. coinciding with these screams for help was a smell of mouldy dirt and a rancid stench of death. It sent shivers up Randel's spine. He felt a sudden urge to get the hell out of there. Unable to move due to dizziness, Bolovich shrank within himself as darkened ghouls began escaping the shadows. They giggled at the opportunity for freedom as the ground beneath their victims' feet began collapsing. Then, without any warning, a new presence emerged. Something fiercer and more terrifying than could be imagined. The world went silent as the darkness got closer, creeping in silently from behind. Whatever evil had awakened in Wellington Hospital was now aware of Randel's existence. The darkness emanated wickedness along with sinful intent. It was more than just the ghoul under your bed as a child. This abomination was pure suffering, doubt, and anger. It brought out all of Randel's insecurities and self-loathing. He dared not look over his shoulder. Frozen with fear, Bolovich clenched as the sounds around him hit both extremes of high and low pitches. It consumed his senses while the devil from behind watched on. Perspiring profusely, Randel's mouth went dry as his body almost collapsed under its own weight. He was caught in a nightmare. With no end in sight, he reached out towards the people at the end of the hall. The older man with a fedora hat was the first to turn, revealing glowing evil eyes and shivering lips like he was possessed. Immediately after, the family stood up abruptly like machines, turning their heads in unison and displaying the same evil intent. As the darkness crept closer, Randel's emotions consumed him and he felt like he was going to burst. With a warm and disturbing breath down the back of his neck, he shivered in fear. Whatever was going to transpire was about to happen now. He cringed and shut his eyes as tightly as possible, preparing for some type of impact. His anxiety consumed him as he felt a creepy hand across his shoulder. This was it. This was the end. There was nothing he could do to stop it. He waited for the inevitable and waited until... "Hey mate, how you doing?" a friendly voice asked. "Wow, you look like shit," they continued. There was a sudden silence. Randel opened his eyes to see that the room was no longer moving. The sounds were typical for that of a hospital, and it was like nothing he'd just experienced was real. A fog had been lifted from his mind as quickly as someone flicking a switch. "Mate, seriously, have you lost it?" the voice asked in a heavy British accent. Now able to comprehend what was happening, Randel turned to see his slim workmate, Xavier, in his expensive suit. His friend was noticeably concerned. Quickly getting a hold of himself by shaking his head and blinking his eyes rapidly, Bolovich responded. "Hey, man, sorry about that. I copped a bad hit to the head." "No problem at all, mate. Just happy to see you're okay. Cool threads, by the way. The bloodstains really bring out your eyes. You can tell me about it all in the car, as we should probably get the hell out of this place. It's depressing. Are you ready to leave?" Randel looked towards the bland and sterile nurses' station to see some staff turning away after listening to the conversation. He wondered how long he was spaced out for and even if he should be leaving the hospital. But staying wasn't an option. He wanted to go home. He turned to Xavier and nodded. The two men used the elevator before entering Xavier's expensive car. They both kept silent until exiting the hospital, where Bolovich felt the need to explain himself. He didn't say much, just that he was in a car crash and couldn't remember anything about the night it happened. He kept everything else to himself. It was an odd journey back home as the local neighbourhood appeared different. It was like Randel had been away for years instead of days. London was foreign, and the person he was now differed from who he was before the accident. Thankfully, things became more familiar when they drove up Tiller Road and parked outside the first floor apartment. Xavier, who'd respected his friend's lack of intel regarding the crash and recovery, grudgingly accepted his workmate's decline to walk him up the stairs. "I owe you one, Xavier. I'll remember you said that the next time we go for beers. Take care." After his friend drove off, Randel turned towards his apartment block. His rental was in the top right-hand corner. So far, no neighbours were peering out their windows to gawk at his blood-soaked clothing. Seeing this as a blessing, he, as quickly as he could, made his way around the left side of the building before going up the steep staircase. When he reached the top, he was exhausted and had to hang on to the rickety rail. The refreshing wind blew his hair back before he dropped his keys on the ground. Picking them up was more effort than it should have been. Walking into his home, Randel noticed a vacant smell that arose when no one had lived in a space for multiple days. It was neither a good nor bad smell. It just didn't represent a home-like feeling one might hope for. It also spoke to his status as a single male who didn't think of owning items that gave off pleasing aromas. It made him wonder if he'd been single for too long. He walked past the kitchen, which was immediately to his left. The floor was dirty and the cabinets were an ugly off-orange colour, reflecting the 80s period in which it was built. The sidewall to his right was brick and led into the lounge. Randel had realised a while back that if you throw your scarves against it, they stick. He thought it was cool. Such imagery can only be pulled off by 18-year-old art degree students. Otherwise, it was just weird. Two small steps led to the rectangular lounge room with dirty, light grey stained carpets. Randel tripped over his stairs on his way up, only just keeping his footing. He must have tripped over those darn things 100 times since he'd moved in. After a brief inspection, Bolovich noted that everything in the apartment was in order. Due to his OCD, he always turned off all the power points except for the fridge and bedside lamps before exiting. And as everything was in order, it likely meant that he hadn't rushed out the door the night of the crash. Unfortunately, it didn't tell him anything significant about that night. He still didn't know where he was going or why he was driving there. If only this were the worst of his dilemmas. Feeling weary, Bolovich threw his keys on the coffee table before walking into the hallway towards the bathroom. The carpet on this side of the apartment was an awful red plaid that continued into the bedroom. It was horrible, though he'd been there long enough not to notice it anymore. Beyond its rundown appearance, Randel's apartment had some redeeming characteristics. Firstly, the block was well laid out. 4 apartments faced the front, 4 more, in the middle, looked towards the neighbours, and the last 4 faced the alley at the back. This meant he barely had to bump into others, which was his preference. The second redeeming factor was his balcony that led off the lounge. It had a view of the city, allowing him to see the sunset. He was out there most nights, drinking, thinking, overanalyzing, and often antagonizing about his life choices. Besides work, this took up most of Bolovich's valuable time. After grabbing a scotch from the kitchen, Randel stood on the balcony, looking towards the city. He intended to think about his memory loss and what steps he would take next, but his mind was empty. He was too tired. Rather than finishing his drink, he put the glass down, removed his blood-soaked clothing, and made his way to the bedroom.
I can feel your heart beating now till the
Before collapsing into bed, he drew the blinds, blocking out the calm vanilla sky. He fell into a deep slumber.